Okay, good. So let's continue the conversation. So I think the lessons of Ukraine is because Russia's economy is dependent on energy, and that's why it's not affected much by the Western sanctions, right? Because a lot of other countries still needs to buy oil and buy gas. But China's economy is different. It's heavily dependent on exporting to the Western consumer markets.
Is
Um,
it?
well, it's so far it's China's biggest.
Yang, let me ask you what share of China's economy is exports?
Well, I don't have an exact figure, but
I,
the
I do. I can tell
what's the
you
yeah,
it's 20%.
yeah, but that's still the Chinese economy. It
And do you know what percentage of that is to the United States? I can tell you it's very small.
well
So,
you have to add that to the West as a whole concept, right? The European Union, Japan, Australia, and American Canada. So the Western consumer market. So put it this way, the Chinese economy even though say let's say export as proportion of GDP, but that margin effect is quite important in it because for the Communist Party to maintain its legitimacy, the only reason it had kept its legitimacy for the last 40 years is that it keeps the economy growing because the Chinese people as a whole, it's not ideological, right? They don't really care. Like, well, same as America,
mhm,
I guess. Not in every other country, people's priority are not politics, but rather the improvement of their life standard.
exactly.
So the
Mhm.
Chinese people see their life improved a lot in the last 40 years. It's a growing middle class, and that's the claim to legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party. A military adventure or invasion of Taiwan will seriously disrupt the Chinese economy because the way the economy is structured, the domestic demand is not sufficient to sustain the economic growth. Well, even if, as you said, well, the export as a proportion of GDP it's not that heavy,
Um,
but if you to keep the economy growing, that's the China's relationship with the world, especially with the West, is very important. And unlike Russia, so that's why China's economy is heavily interlinked with the global market. And so a war and with will seriously disrupt the Chinese economy. And with that, will seriously disrupt the legitimacy of the Communist Party because as the Communist Party's first priority has always been maintain its power, and the economy,
yeah, I'm
the
actually
economy.
really, really glad that China is not a democracy because Taiwan would be an ashtray now. And probably Japan too, because do you know what? Everybody I talk to there are up for a bit of a military adventurism. But fortunately, you're correct. The Communist Party of China is a very cautious and conservative party, and they don't like war, if at all possible. They would prefer to minimize bloodshed. I think that's a good thing. And I actually think that's a good reason to work with them. I like that. I think the United States is in way too much of a hurry to reach for the military option. And not only have we lost a lot of moral legitimacy, we've also spent a lot of our blood and treasure to the point where I just don't see it as conceivable that Americans would be down with our boys coming to die for Taiwan's freedom.
Well,
By the way, yeah,
that's why I don't see any military uh, uh, s-
I, I don't
possibility
see.
scenario. Is it because China and US are both nuclear power, and there's no way the two countries will be at war with each other.
Oh,
So
so much. I feel like that's what a lot of people said about Putin and Ukraine before. Oh, there's no way he's going to invade, and he invaded.
well,
And
it's slightly different. Is it because that's why, as I said, the United States w was not clear enough before the start of the war that to warn
well,
Putin off.
you can't say United States ideally would be XYZ. United States, I wouldn't trust the United States to water my house plants while I'm away right now. That's the level of trust I am at with the United States. Not only are we forced to make this investment of TSMC to tech transfer into Arizona. So basically, tech transferring our technology, but instead of doing it for money, we're doing it with our own money. Forced into a joint venture with Intel to raise up a competitor, forced to make a hideous amount of investments, a whole bunch of which is probably going to go into Donald Trump and family's personal purse. I have no doubt. I'm sick and tired of depending on the Americans. The Chinese, oh yeah, they might take away, some rights or not. I don't know. Depends on what we negotiate. Seems like a far better deal. That's the way it
Well,
is. And they're doing amazing things. When was the
how
last
do
time you
you
went to China?
how how do you actually negotiate? Because you keep mentioning that you are in a position of weakness compared to China. Taiwan is a much smaller, right?
Yeah.
So how
Mhm.
do you actually negotiate? That you can't
Yeah. Well, I think a
you
huge
have no cards on the table, is it?
I don't think so. I think we have no cards compared to the United States. Compared to China, I believe that they want a peaceful reunification. They don't want a forced reunification. But I think it's also foolish to expect them to put up with status quo forever. So basically, we had more chips in the 90s. We have less chips now. Eventually, we are going to have no chips. So the best time to negotiate with China was back in the 90s. The second best time is today. And in terms of negotiations, nobody's expecting to, just step up and make a deal. It's not even possible right now because obviously our leader is very anti-China. I think it's important for us as people, as the opposition party, is to understand each other, is to create friendship and create mutual connection between both sides of the straits. A lot of people in Taiwan work in China, or they want to retire in China, or they've married spouses from China. So there's already a lot of people to people connection. I think the more people to people connection there is, the more cultural connection there is, the more we'll understand each other. And then the more they'll learn about our system and the more we'll learn about their system. That'll make an eventual reunification much easier and less traumatic.
The opinion polls shows the majority of Taiwanese against reunification. So how do you propose to persuade the majority of the population there to
Well,
accept?
I think that polls change all the time, and they've changed in the past, and they will change in the future. So I don't presume to speak for fellow Taiwanese. I'm only speaking for myself.
Mm.
After all, for now, we still have freedom of speech, right? And this is a trend that I'm seeing. A lot of there aren't that many Taiwanese, hardly any, that are actually pro-independence.
Yeah, but I
Truly,
understand
I don't know. A lot
mostly
of them.
pro status quo, right? Yeah.
Now, what does it mean to be pro-status quo? A lot of people are pro status quo because they're afraid of their lives changing. But if there is an invasion, their life is about to change in the most violent and unpleasant way ever. So I think that pro status quo can mean a lot of things. We don't always get what we want in life. They might also have very outdated ideas of what it's like in China. A lot of people, just the other day, my sister's personal trainer said to her, "Oh, I had tickets bought to go to Inner Mongolia for holidays, but then I heard that they organ harvested people there. Then I got scared and I canceled my ticket." And it's just like stuff like that, or people
Well, I
lose.
guess it is a little bit extreme, but still, you can't deny that organ harvesting was, at least from the last, maybe now the situation got better, but the previous 10 or 20 years, it was a huge issue in China because it's the market, the it's completely out of control, the
Mhm.
transplant medical market. And
I
I'm saying
wouldn't I
this
wouldn't
from
know about that. I
yeah, but
wouldn't know about that.
well, I'm saying this from personal experience. My own brother, he had liver transplant in Beijing. That's about 15 years ago, and there was no like in the US or in any other developed country, right? You have a national register. Everybody's listed there and according to assessed on medical necessity, right? The doctors give them a rating like which one should gonna go on the top of the list to receive the transplant. At that time in China, there is no such thing. If you have money, you pay the doctor, and the doctor will get the organ, and who knows from where. And one can only guess it's probably from prison somewhere, and because there's no such national queue, you pay the doctor and you get it. So that's from my own personal experience. And so I think you can't really deny that there was a huge problem at that time.
So your brother was personally okay with receiving a organ transplant
Well, when you
from
are in a life,
probably
well,
a
he had sadly passed away after a few years after the transplant. But still, I mean,
Mhm.
when you are in that life and death situation, I guess morality is not your first concern. But it's just that from my own personal experience, I know from firsthand that there's a huge black market.
Do you feel like your brother is a bad person because he made that choice?
Well, I don't think it's for me to judge. I mean, if I'm in that same situation, I probably wouldn't care about where the organ is from. But what I'm saying, that's why the state
But
they
your
need to step
excuse
in.
me, I just want to clarify.
Yeah,
Your brother made a personal choice to receive an organ transplant that he must have known was from a shady source.
yeah,
And to me,
that's what I'm saying.
that is the
That's why
same
you need
that
to have a gut
your
regulation. You need to have your state.
your brother shares the same culpability, and
No,
but you don't blame him for it, but you want to smear a whole nation
it's not a
for
smear.
something.
This is not a smear. This is stating the fact that
Okay. Well,
the state
I'm
has.
gonna say the same thing to you then. I think just as you think of your brother as a man in a desperate situation who made a desperate choice, and you still love him and you forgive him. I don't know what happened with China and organs in the past, but I don't see any evidence of it now because if there were, they'll be all over the place. I don't see any evidence of it now. I don't see evidence of the Uyghur genocide now. Xinjiang looks beautiful. I just see progress everywhere. I see the future. I see so many people lifted out of poverty. I see like planning for the future. I see tremendous technical development. I see robots. I see just people who are really grateful for their country for taking care of them and
But you're
making their
talking
lives
about different
better.
things. There is great technological development. There's great
Yeah, but
improvement of
do you
life.
know what you're? Well, this
But
is what I'm trying to get at.
but
There is something very
that doesn't
hypocritical,
change the fact that there were a huge black market. Always and
which your
also
brother partaked
yes,
in,
yes,
which your
and
family partaked
it's
in.
sanctioned by the state if because the source of the organ donation, a lot of them come from the prison system. And you know who runs the prison? This government, the state runs the prison. So it's undeniable fact there were a huge corruption, even though it's not sanctioned by the central government, it's sanctioned maybe by the local government, and that is a huge issue. And and I don't think it's you can deny that. And there was there were many people doing organ transplant tourism to China. And you know why? Because if you pay, you get the transplant. So
I don't think you're
it
in
has to
an
come from somewhere, right?
I don't think first of all, I don't think you've really given evidence. Second of all, I don't think you're in a position to point any fingers if your family took took part in the same practice. How can you turn around and point fingers?
I'm not pointing fingers.
Apparently,
I'm stating the fact.
it wasn't a problem for your brother to go to China to get the organ
No, 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 not go
transplant.
China. He is Chinese. He lives in China. He's a Chinese.
All I'm saying this obviously matters a lot to you. I don't I am fairly convinced that if it did take place, it's been cleaned up. And to me, there's so much like you can dig through the trash of any country and come up with any number of horrible things. And to use that to negate a whole country, that's really unfair. That's a
Well,
double standard. You could do that
well,
for the
I
United
don't think
States.
that's negating it. We're talking about fact and fact, right? Technological advancement and improvement of the economy and living standard doesn't doesn't change the fact that there were human rights problems and abuses. I think we can
Sure.
acknowledge both.
Let's say that there were human rights and abuses. There are
Yeah.
human rights and abuses
So
all over the place. Yes.
yes. So why deny them? That's what I'm saying.
I'm not denying them.
Well, you are.
You're the
You are.
one. You're the one that said that your brother participated in them. I'm
Yeah.
taking your word for it.
I'm stating the fact, and you're denying the fact, right? There were
No, I'm not denying the fact.
there were plenty of reports, right?
Listen, what I'm saying is it's ridiculous to be as a tourist afraid to go to Inner Mongolia
Yeah,
because you
that's
think you're
well,
gonna.
that's
And let's just both
that's
agree,
over the top,
right?
but
And then the rest of it, I don't care, okay? Because there's so much like the evidence is so scant for a lot of those things. Like during the COVID, of course, I believe in the Uyghur stuff. I was like, oh my God, the Uyghur genocide is so horrible. Oh my God, they're
well, I think
genociding the
let's
Uyghurs.
talk about
And
that.
then
The,
afterwards, it's
the
like,
gen,
hey,
I think
it's 2025. Xinjiang's totally open to tourists, and you're saying you're
well,
still showing me the same grainy
no,
satellite photos, and you had doing the same photo of the guys in the blue suit, and you couldn't find
there
another
were
photo.
re-education camps, even though they might cease to exist now, because in the last
Okay, in that
10
case,
or
good.
15
It
years,
seems like they
they
got rid of a really gnarly terrorism
well,
problem
they,
because those Tech Fury fighters are nasty. Do you know a lot of Uyghurs left China and they went to different places? They went to Afghanistan. They went to Syria to rape girls. And they went to Afghanistan and they blew up a mosque.
yeah,
And it
that
was
doesn't
full of
change
Hazara.
that
Hundreds of people died. Listen, if
that
there's a group
that
that
didn't
needs to be
change the
cracked
fact
down
there were
on,
re-education
that
camps.
yes, and I think fantastic. You
Well,
know
see,
what?
you so
You
there were
gotta
camps. There were
you
camps. Even you acknowledge there were camps, right?
they
I
acknowledge
understand.
that there were camps, but it's not a genocide.
Well,
That kind of hyperbolic language is just
do you know what's the
stupid.
definition of
So I
genocide?
think
What's the
you
definition of genocide?
I listen, you're so biased. You come here and talk to me, and I agree to talk to you because I thought you were a reasonable person. And it just seems like
Well,
you just
we're
want
having a
to project
discussion.
your bias
No,
on me.
it's not about
Why
bias.
are you
What's the definition of
why are you
what's the
why
definition of genocide? What's the
um
United Nations definition of genocide?
I don't know.
Well, I think a lot of the confusion over the situation in Xinjiang is from a lot of people's misunderstanding of the word genocide, because the common plain understanding is a mass killing of a certain
Yeah.
ethnic group of people. But a broader definition from the United Nations Charter is the systematic erasure of cultural identity. Let's include that. So I think even though I probably disagree with the use of genocide to apply to Xinjiang, but I understand where the critics came from by using that word,
So
because
was
there
there
was a
genocide in France? Because there used to be a lot of different languages.
there may
Occitan
be
used to be a
there may be
language all over.
there might be
So
there
why
was a
don't we ever talk about the French genocide,
because they're
right?
not ongoing
It's
because
it's double
there
standard.
were a genocide of the Native Americans. That's true, right? Historically, that happens. What I'm
But they
saying,
got killed. They got
yeah,
killed. That's
people are
different.
killed.
No,
Yeah.
I think you know what? I really think the use of genocide should be reserved for when a whole bunch of people are killed. If you're just going to be like you enforced a cultural change on them, that's capitalism,
Well,
man.
that's still
You know what?
by
I really,
definition that
you
complies
know
with the
what? You
definition.
know.
Even though,
Oh,
as I
so
said,
capitalism is genocide.
yeah, I agree, and
Do
actually
you agree that capitalism is genocide?
actually I agree with you that I don't think personally I don't think the use of the word genocide is
We're so hung up on the definition of things. It's really really silly. Let me tell you what it is, okay? A lot of Uyghurs are now denied jobs. Do you know why they're denied jobs?
because
Because
the
people won't hire
enforcement of
them.
labor rules. Mhm.
Do you know people won't hire them? Because Western factories get boycotted by people who allege there's a Uyghur genocide. And as a result, Uyghur can't get factory jobs. They're doing okay because the central government's pumping a bunch of money into Xinjiang. They're really boosting tourism. They're living just fine and they do regular jobs and they speak Uyghur and they learn Uyghur at school. There's not a problem. I think it's one of the most successful anti-terrorism drives I've ever seen anywhere. Like it's really, really gnarly to deal with Islamic terrorism. It's a horrible scourge on the planet. And I think they got radicalized. I don't think they were that radical before. It was a foreign strain, I think from Saudi Arabia. I don't know exactly the kind of Islam it is. It's nasty. And if you can put people in camps, give them a good education and send them out again, and nobody's killed, then Yahtzee. I think they should. Yeah, I think they
Well,
did a great job, and
well, I
I
guess
think
well,
attack China for that is really ridiculous when it's in fact a success story. Xinjiang is a success story.
well, I guess so at least you acknowledge there were camps, right? Because
Yeah, oh
the
yeah, yeah, definitely. There were
yeah.
camps, but I just don't think camps and genocide, you're just too many things at once, Like you're conflating too many things and you're not realizing that the central government had a wicked problem to solve because there were knife attacks, right? People were getting killed in the train stations and bombs. And when that happened to America, when 9/11 happened to America, we invaded two whole countries,
Yeah, and that's
right?
wrong.
So
And
the the
and
the
the
the, the
wrong, the
sort
war
of
in we can all
we're
agree
not
that
we're in
it's wrong to
no
invade Iraq.
we were in no position to point any fingers. Well, the whole yellow cake disaster thing. I mean, I just you know what? I want to. This is just what I want to say. Okay, liberal democracy is fantastic, could be fantastic, but lately it's been a lot less fantastic. Let's face it. You look at Donald Trump. You look at what's going on in Europe. Liberal democracy have globally degraded in level of leadership, in social cohesion. And I think it's really time for
For
liberals.
authoritarianism.
No, 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 I didn't say that. I think it's really time for people who believe in liberal democracy to fix it. I think it needs to be fixed. And then let's just call it a let's just call a 20-year moratorium on pushing your system on other people. I think the main problem with liberal democracy is not liberal democracy, it's the idea that every single country in the world must eventually become a liberal democracy. What if that isn't true? What if Iraq will not eventually become a liberal democracy? What if Afghanistan will not eventually become a liberal democracy? What if Russia doesn't want to be a liberal democracy? So I
Well,
feel like
well,
every
let's look at
country,
this way. There's 24 million Taiwanese. They're mostly, well, a majority of them are actually Han Chinese. If they can form an effective and robust democracy, why can't the
is
mainland
it,
Chinese
it
have the same?
do you think the Taiwan democracy is at all effective? Do you know that our economy has been stagnant pretty much for the last 30 years? Do you know that we fight in the legislature
Your GDP
physically?
growth for the last 30 years is quite steady, isn't it?
Well, does GDP growth equal do anything when you've got stagnant wages for young people rising up into society? When you've had housing assets boom year after year, but
Well,
young
there
people's
were housing inflation
wages.
in China too. So
Yeah,
I don't know
and
if you want to blame
do
it
you
to the
know what
democracy.
happened? Do you know what happened? First of all, you're the one who says no whataboutism. Okay, I'm just telling you how things don't work in Taiwan right now. But since you got onto the subject, actually, I admire the Chinese for how they handled their housing bubble during the Hu Jintao years, maybe the Jiang Zemin years as well. Yeah, housing bubble got out of control. When Xi Jinping took over, that was on his list of things to do, and he had to have time to prepare for it. He couldn't do it right away, but
So
the
they need
plan
another
was
term to do it.
well, no, no, no. I'm not. I'm just talking about housing right now.
Mhm.
The three red line policy was pretty much set for 2020, 2020, around that time when COVID hit. It might have affected it a little bit. And it was basically a mass deleveraging. And the I don't think of it as Xi doing it himself, that's not how it works. It is really like a big bureaucracy. So you have to think of it like a system, the system. What they decided was to funnel all the money. So basically, they took the housing bubble and instead of having it bust, they funneled all of it. It's a controlled demolition, and they instead put it into manufacturing. And they were able to turn on, because all their banks are state owned, so they could do this. They turned on the taps for EV startups, battery startups. So the money had a productive place to go, and they mandated the state to lend. And you can say, well, now they have a manufacturing bubble. That is true. They have a manufacturing bubble, but technology bubbles are usually better than asset bubbles when it comes to long run effects on the economy, right? Because the technology bubbles tend to leave you with useful progress, whereas housing bubble just leaves you with nothing. So I give them a lot of credit for being probably the only major economy that I can think of to have proactively taken on a housing bubble in a time and place of their own choosing. Are they out of the woods? Not completely yet. Youth unemployment is really bad in China right now. And of course, the consumers don't want to spend because a lot of them just saw their net worth shrink by a lot, right? Depending on how exposed they were to real estate. But having said that, nobody's starving. Nobody's really like suicidal. There's nobody on the streets exactly. So and they have managed to gain an edge on so many of the technology of tomorrow. And they don't have an edge in AI and chips. That's just about the only thing. And they're awfully close in AI. So I admire that. Their nuclear power plants are incredible. At some point, you can't argue with the results. And what I want you I see how deeply you love the liberal democracy. And I too would like to preserve as much liberal democracy as possible for Taiwan. But I think we need to have a little humility about how badly liberal democracy has also fucked up. Because in Taiwan right now, we have an epic mess. And we have things not getting done properly. And when people talk about which president it is they still miss the most, the president they think did Taiwan the most good, they say Jiang Jingguo, Chiang Kai-shek's son,
Mm.
who also wasn't elected, but he did so
Benevolent
much good
dictator, right?
things.
What they call,
Huh?
I guess what they call
Well,
a
I
benevolent
wouldn't call
dictator.
him
Yeah.
I wouldn't call him a dictator. I would call him an authoritarian.
Mm.
And I think that without him, we would never have TSMC because TSMC took decades of industrial planning, starting from I don't know, like 80s or something like that. Anyhow, it was decades in the making, maybe even the 70s. I forget the exact date. And it took a lot of arm twisting of private sector actors to get it going, plus public sector support to not just grow the companies and pick winners and losers. He didn't do that. He did what the Chinese are doing now. He created a whole ecosystem, and then he invited entrepreneurs to participate as players in the ecosystem, and he let them compete. That's exactly what China is doing right now, and that's
Well,
why their EVs are so good.
Jiang Jingguo did took the Taiwan to the path of democratization. So would you expect or would you hope that the mainland China will go on this path, the same path in the near future or in the long term?
In the long term, who knows? In the short run, no. In the short run, no. Because if I look at the quality of life in Taiwan, the standard of infrastructure, um, the quality of governance, the quality of leadership, I think we are worse than China. I really enjoy freedom of speech. I'm an outspoken person, so I really
Well,
hope,
I've never been to
that,
Taiwan, so I guess I
yeah.
have to defer to you about this about the situation on the ground in Taiwan.
There's
But
also a lot of corruption. I'm sure there's corruption in China too, but in,
well,
in
well,
Taiwan, the corruption is such
didn't
that,
Xi Jinping just purge 9 generals from the military because of corruption? That's
yeah, yeah. Well,
quite a
I
corrupt
think that's
military,
that's
isn't it?
great. That's great. That's great. They should do that in the United States, but they can't. So the corruption just goes on. Like we know Donald Trump is corrupt. Nobody's ever going to purge him.
But you sound
Um,
very pessimistic about the on the ground situation in Taiwan. But like, didn't Taiwan you have a Medicare system for everyone, like a universal health care, right? that they don't have that in China, mainland China. I mean, in terms of average healthcare provision, Taiwan is way better than mainland China. There are a lot of there's a lot of
Definitely.
areas that Taiwan did was pretty good, isn't it?
Well, I think the way I think about it is Taiwan is living off the past. You have to remember the national health insurance system was introduced decades ago, and it's only gotten worse. There's a kind of entropy that has set in over Taiwan. And I hate to say it because I live here, but things have just gotten shittified. Why do you think there's three political parties, right? There's a KMT, there's a DPP, and a TPP. Where did the TPP come from? The KMT were the old school, of course. And then the DPP are like the anti-KMT. And the TPP, which is a lot of the young people now, they're just sick and tired. They're sick and tired of how badly Taiwan is governed. And they're sick and tired of not having a future, of low wage, of Taiwan being hollowed out by corruption. And you're saying, well, that's good, isn't it? It's democracy, it's just working. Well, it's not working very well because the KMT and TPP split each other's votes, and we're stuck with the DPP again, and bad governance again, and empty promises again. And I I want Taiwan to remain democratic. I want us to figure it out honestly, because I think freedom is a good in and of itself, and if we can remain free, very good. I want freedom of speech. I think it's beautiful in and of itself, even if it is at a cost. I think it's important. Having said that, I can't recommend anybody copy our system, because objectively, if you use KPIs such as, are people better off, or economic growth, it's just not working. It's not working for people.
Well,
So
isn't that a problem with the grass is always greener on the other side? Because you talked very admiringly
maybe
the
the grass is
improvement.
greener on the other side, and
Well,
maybe
let me tell you. First, I acknowledge there were great progress made in China, all right, the economy and the living standards. But there is a huge systematic problem with inequality in terms of healthcare provision, pension. The vast
yeah,
number of people in the countryside don't have adequate access to equal healthcare, equal pension compared to the citizen living in the cities. Even though China is supposedly a socialist country, there are huge problem when you get old. If you are in the countryside, if you get sick, you are practically on your own, you're on your own family, because the provision by the state in terms of healthcare is minimal for people in the countryside. So there's not all rosy picture in China. You see shiny buildings, shiny highways, shiny infrastructure. That's all true, but there is a vast landscape of countryside, country people living in very unequal situations. So there are problems in every society, and I think you just acknowledged the problem in Taiwan, and I think you should also acknowledge there are huge problems to be solved in China as well. It's not like the authority will
absolutely.
solve every
I
problem.
don't think that any system is perfect, but let me tell you, I do believe this. If China adopted a democratic system the way it is in Taiwan, they would spiral down a sinkhole so fast that they'll end up like India in no time. India is a democracy. Think about that.
Well,
Okay.
I guess
So there's a
let's
very large countries that are difficult, the very small countries. And I
well,
think democracy could work in Taiwan. I want democracy to
yeah,
keep
I understand
being
where you're coming
experimented
from.
on
Yeah,
in Taiwan.
yeah, I
But I
understand.
would not recommend democracy for China. Maybe in the future, maybe voting will be different in the future. Maybe it'll all be on the blockchain and we'll be like, I don't know. But I just think that it's normal, it's healthy for countries to be sovereign, including having different types of governance systems.
Mhm.
I don't think it's always the case that liberal democracy is always the most legitimate form of governance. I think it depends on outcome for the
I
population.
Actually, I don't disagree with you, I guess. Let's end on this note. I guess you should be thankful that you are still able to express your views here from Taiwan, right? If one day you become part of China, you might not be able to do a Zoom link to talk freely about your views.
Well, at least I'll have better basic infrastructure.
Okay. Well, I guess you have your priorities. All right. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well,
All right.
thank you very much.
Well,
Thanks
thank
for
you very
having me
much.
on.
Well, it's good to talk to you. Bye bye.
Bye.